Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular council meeting for June the 19th. I'll call the meeting to order and we'll move right to adoption of the agenda. Now we have some alterations here, so I'll read the recommendation. And it reads that the agenda for the June 19th, 2023 regular meeting of council be accepted and passed with the deletion of the following. Under items for consideration, 2B, the report DC 2023-023 for Maple Hill Estates Inc. That's that amending development agreement, and the bylaws. Item A and item B. Item A is bylaw number 6000-23, which is the parking bylaw, and bylaw number 48-23, which is the bylaw to amend bylaw 30-22, being the bylaw to enter into a development agreement with Maple Hill Estates Inc. I'm assuming those will be coming back to a future meeting.
Yes, they will.
Okay, can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Rankin. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll go around the horseshoe in terms of disclosure of pecuniary interest on anything on tonight's agenda. I have nothing to declare. Councillor Rankin?
I have nothing.
Councillor Hearn?
No.
Councillor McCabe?
I have none.
Okay, thank you. We'll move right to presentations. So we have our report with regard to our Indigenous land acknowledgement. Brooke, did you want to provide any context before we go right into the presentation? Go ahead.
For you, Chair Lennox, thank you so much. We're very happy to have Martin Cooper here today. He is an associate with our consulting firm who worked on an Indigenous land acknowledgement for the Township of Wellington North in partnership with several of our other Wellington County municipalities. So this project began several years ago when the CAOs decided to work together to develop this land acknowledgement. And I feel like it's very appropriate that it's coming to council for consideration during National Indigenous History Month. So again, I'd just like to thank Martin for being here today to give council an overview of the work that's been done to date and how we plan on moving forward. And I'll just hand it over to Martin now.
Okay, thanks, Brooke. I'm just going to do a short presentation and I'll start right now. Mayor Lennox, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to present this important project to you tonight, the Wellington County Municipalities Land Acknowledgement Project. My name is Martin Cooper, Senior Associate at ASI and the Indigenous Engagement Lead on the project. ASI was retained by the Chief Administrative Officers of 6 of the local municipalities in Wellington County to assist in the development of Indigenous land acknowledgements. A land acknowledgement involves making a statement acknowledging the presence of Indigenous peoples past and present and recognizing Indigenous traditional lands and treaties. The land acknowledgements can also identify the displacement and exclusion of Indigenous peoples from their traditional territories. As part of this project, ASI worked with a working group made up of the municipal CAOs. ASI conducted critical review of land acknowledgements to get an understanding of both the best practices associated with creating and giving land acknowledgements, as well as the criticisms that have been raised regarding this practice. Information was gathered from opinion pieces by Indigenous and non-Indigenous individuals, from existing land acknowledgements, and through ongoing conversations with Indigenous nations. A review of primary and secondary sources was undertaken to get an understanding of the Indigenous history of the area, as well as an understanding of the treaties covering the municipalities within Wellington County. Research was also conducted with the specific intent to try to identify specific examples of exclusion and displacement that could be recognized in a land acknowledgement. Following the critical review and the background and historical research, individual land acknowledgements were drafted for each of the participating municipalities. Final reporting also included drafting an information booklet for use by staff. It should be noted that the report information booklet, as well as the land acknowledgements themselves, should be considered living documents to be reviewed on a regular basis and updated as needed. Land acknowledgements are an opportunity for the larger society to state the wrongs of the past and contribute to a feeling of inclusivity, and should not be a source of further alienation. A land acknowledgement should not be the culmination of a municipality's attempt at reconciliation, but a starting point. Once adopted, one should seek opportunities to improve the relationship between non-Indigenous and Indigenous members of the community, as well as ways to reach out and support Indigenous communities. Finally, a land acknowledgement should not be static, but fluid and open to revision. Indigenous peoples have been living in, traveling through, using land in this area for over 13,000 years. It is only relatively recently in the long history of the area that the arrival of colonizers and settlers and alteration of the landscape disrupted the rhythm of life for the Indigenous groups living in the area. Wellington County is covered by several treaties, and one of the interesting things is because of the central location of Wellington County in Southern Ontario, a lot of different treaties intersect. So there's a lot of, it's an interesting area for sure in terms of the history. The Township of Wellington North falls within the lands covered by the 1701 Nanfan Treaty, the 1792 Treaty 3, the Nottawasaga Purchase, which is also called Treaty 18, the Adjutant's Purchase, Treaty 19, and the Saugeen Tract Purchase, Treaty 45.5. It was the most recent treaty signed in 1836. The Township of Wellington North is located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Saugeen Ojibwa Nation, as well as the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee. Input from Indigenous nations was integral to the success of the land acknowledgement project. The following nations were contacted about the project: Amshawaning First Nation, Beausoleil First Nation, Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs Council, Kettle and Stony Point First Nation, the Métis Nation of Ontario, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Saugeen Ojibwa Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council. Engagement with rights-bearing Indigenous nations as it relates to the land acknowledgement project began in December 2021 with a circulation of a project notice to the nations. The notice described the decision to undertake the project, its goals and timelines, and provided contact information. A project update was circulated in May 2022 to inform the nations that a draft report with draft land acknowledgements had been produced, and the document was circulated for their review and comment. The notice also invited recipients to contact the chair of the working group should they want to discuss the project further or request a meeting. Representatives of the Six Nations of the Grand River, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Saugeen Ojibwa Nation provided written comments on the report. ASI met with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation to discuss technical aspects of the report. Members of the working group and ASI also met with representatives of Six Nations of the Grand. ASI worked with this community to address concerns and feedback and made revisions to relevant sections of the report. The CAOs of the municipality involved in this project are committed to continued engagement with identified Indigenous nations with rights and interests in the project. The final report will be circulated to the nations as well as a notice of project completion. Wellington North's land acknowledgement is as follows. The lands that we know today as the Township of Wellington North have been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the Township of Wellington North, the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee could not continue their traditional lifestyle and settled in their villages on the Credit River, Lake Huron, Lake Simcoe, and in the Grand River Valley. These nations uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the Township of Wellington North remains home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with Indigenous nations. Thank you. Questions?
Thanks, Martin, for that. So we have a recommendation here that says basically to receive the report. It includes the acknowledgement, as Martin has just included it. And then there's a clause, and further that this land acknowledgement be included as a sign of respect and remembrance at key township meetings / business as follows. Shall be included in the inaugural meetings of council, official meetings with Indigenous nations, formal unveilings and ceremonies, and may be considered if appropriate at other council meetings or committee public meetings, community meetings, public information centers, open house and or public workshops where there is a formal presentation or welcome. And further that the land acknowledgement can also be placed at the beginning of important municipal documents such as the official plan, heritage registry, archaeological management plan, transportation master plan, water, wastewater master plan, etc., also outlined herein. And further that staff be directed to update the procedure bylaw to include the Indigenous land acknowledgement. So could I get a mover and a seconder for that?
Yeah.
Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Hearn. And we'll open it up for questions to Martin and any questions with regard to that recommendation. So Councillor McCabe.
Yep. Excuse me, and through you, Mayor. Thanks for this, Martin. You were saying just at the start of your presentation that I can't remember the exact words used, but they're not pushback, but there's not opposition to these land acknowledgements. So what, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, they land acknowledgements are, the ones that are being done most recently, like in the last 15 years or so. They come from settler or white society, and they're some Indigenous people feel that they're just pay lip service to reconciliation and cooperation and that type of thing. And it worries them that the land acknowledgement is all that, all that they're going to see in terms of cooperation and, municipalities or other organizations reaching out to them. They're just worried that, it's also to relieve guilt for what happened in the past and that type of thing. So they're quite critical of land acknowledgements. And that's why we thought it was important with this project to reach out to the nations and get their opinion on, what we were planning. The other thing that the other major problem with them sometimes is that they're not well thought out and they're not historically accurate. They'll mention groups that were never in the area or groups that were never in Ontario, for that matter. There's still municipalities in Ontario that have land acknowledgements that acknowledge the Erie who lived on the south side of Lake Erie in New York State and Pennsylvania. They never entered Ontario. So that's an example of many historical inaccuracies. And there's been a lot of criticism, and in the report, we review some of those criticisms and talk about how we're trying to overcome those things with this project.
Any other questions?
Yep. Thanks for that. Excuse me, Martin. So are these, I guess, the words of the land acknowledgement, are they more Indigenous words or like your association, or
Well,
actually kind of put pen to paper?
Well, we used other land acknowledgements that have, that are recognized as being accurate and acceptable, and then we took them to the different nations and got their opinion, and we actually, changed it from the original based on their suggestions. So the words are, the municipality's words that we put together, but they've been vetted by the First Nations who occupied this, or whose ancestors occupied this area. And we made edits accordingly. So it's like a combination of our words, your words, and First Nations words as well. So.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lennox. I'd just like to say that an awful lot of research has gone into this document, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading it and the history. And I think it would be, oh. Wait a sec. Where am I going? I can't get me unmuted. Does that do that? Got it. Okay. Fine. Oh, I did that. Okay. I'd just like to say that I thoroughly enjoyed the document. A lot of research has gone into this, and it was fascinating to read all the history that's going into a statement that we will be able to make on the Indigenous behalf.
Thank you. I just want to comment that the report, the idea is that there's an information booklet that's kind of a summary of what's in the report, so that when new employees or new members of council come on, they're not just going to have the land acknowledgement, but they'll be able to go to the document and see, you know, what the basis of the statements are in the document. So we felt that that was quite important.
Thanks, Martin. Any other questions for Martin or the Councillor Hearn? Go ahead.
I don't have any questions per se. I just wanted to say that I was so impressed with the report. I was completely fascinated. It took me hours to read because I started Googling other things. To be honest, yeah, I started doing other investigative research, so it took me a long time. But I do think that this is so extremely important because we have to remember where we came from to envision where we're going. So I just wanted to say I really, really appreciated the report and how much time it took me to read it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So Martin, I'm going to raise one for you. You know, you talked about that the First Nations were raising concerns, and maybe I'm not articulating this very well, but raising concerns about the how valuable this is as an exercise for the reconciliation effort. And I guess the question I would put to you is, did they provide any suggestions or thoughts on what next steps we might want to consider to help move us towards reconciliation?
Not any specific steps, but I think what they would be looking for is, you know, with certain planning initiatives, certainly when it comes to things like heritage and archaeology, that, and the environment as well. They have a real interest in the environment, not so much in things like transportation, but that, you know, you reach out, the municipality reaches out to them, because a lot of the groups that we talk to, they have consultation departments, and they're quite interested in providing their input for planning issues, for things that have to do with the environment, and they really would like to get involved. So I think the next move is on the part of the municipality to reach out and ask to meet with them and develop a relationship, and that's the whole idea. If the land acknowledgement just ends as a land acknowledgement, it's just, you know, it doesn't go anywhere. But if the next step is the municipality using that as a basis, reaches out to the First Nation and asks them to engage, then they'll appreciate it, and then they'll know that what you're saying is sincere. So you know, there's many different ways. I think we have some suggestions in the report, some of the areas that, you know, you may have common interests in, and other, larger municipalities, that have much more capacity, and regional municipalities are already doing that. And so they already, like the nations already know what the process is like, and but they're just waiting for the phone call, I think.
Okay, thanks for that. I appreciate the context with that. So any other questions or comments on this then? Councillor Rankin?
Thank you. I was just. Everything else is unmuted. I was just. I was just wondering if the wording for our acknowledgement is the same as the other municipalities that went together to create this, and they just changed the name for each individual municipality.
No, actually, it's a good question, but we in fact have different ones for every municipality, mainly, as I said, because there's overlapping in not only treaty territories, but traditional territories. Like the southern part of Wellington County is quite different than the north part of Wellington County. The southern part, like Lynch, for instance, had a confederacy that was there in the 17th century called the Neutral Confederacy, lived in that part of Wellington County, but didn't extend further north. So though the southern municipalities mention the Attawandaron or the Neutral in their land acknowledgement, the southern municipalities don't have history with the Saugeen Ojibwa Nation. Only the ones in the north do. So there's a whole bunch of different, the Haldeman Tract, for instance, which was granted to the Haudenosaunee, doesn't extend as far north as north part of Wellington County. So other municipalities, they mention the Haldeman Tract. So they're all different. They're all in the report, though. Like we listed all the individual ones in the report, the original report, and then we drafted separate ones for 6 different municipalities. So they're really all different.
And Martin, I think your comment that Wellington County is kind of at the intersection of a number of these. I think Wellington North is particularly at the intersection of a number of the treaties in particular. And
yeah.
So
in the report's a map that shows the intersection of all the treaties visually, so you can see how many there are, and why we talked to, or we reached out to so many different First Nations, because their ancestors all, at one time had something to do with Wellington County in terms of land cessions, or even, actually living in the county.
okay. Thank you. Any final questions? Okay. Thank you, Martin, and thank you for bringing this for us and helping us navigate this. This is a challenging file.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you. It's been interesting, and also a lot of fun too.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll call the vote then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to our next presentation. We have I see him sitting here, Sean Kelly, to give us an update on our community improvement program. Well, welcome, Sean.
Thank you. It's PDF. So I'm speaking into this mic, and I believe. Yep, and let me know if you can't hear me. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Kelly. I come from a small design planning firm out of Bellwood, very close to here, just south of here, center of Wellington. And like I say, we're planners, we're rural planners and landscape architects and graphic designers. And I've been helping the township for the last 12 years with their community improvement plan. And today is a second update to the original plan. And you've had a lot of successes. And I'm going to ask Karen to advance slides for me as we go along, and I'll tell you what I'm going to talk about tonight. So the first thing, I have several things I want to talk about tonight, and it'll be about 8 of them. I want to talk about the successes with the Wellington North CIP, the current one that you have. A bit about understanding CIPs, the goals we're looking for, and then the updates that we did for this rendition, some of the opportunities that came about and asked for this update, community improvement project area, or the CIPAs as we call them. We'll go through that really quickly and talk about the incentive programs and then implementation on that. So Wellington North, and we're across the province doing this sort of work, amongst other things. Wellington North has done very well. In the last 12 years, they've had a very successful community improvement through their CIP. It was timed right. It went after the right programs. It was well fitted for a rural community in a township, a Wellington North size. Financial incentives have cultivated over 150 applications over the last or since 2012. So the last 13 years. That's a very good number. $442,000 provided by the township. However, it's always leveraged, and so it caused for about $3.5 million in improvements. So leverage of $2.7 million for Wellington North business owners and their tenants is a really remarkable success for, like I say, communities this size. So they've done very well with this, and I think you should all be proud of it. And if you don't really know what a community improvement plan is, and we do cover the communities that have never done this before, and 12 years ago, Dale had never done this before either. So working with Dale Small, you had to learn a lot of things about the township and about how to position, especially large geographic areas, settlement areas and hamlets and rural areas as well. This is really an economic development tool. You have to have it. It has to be sanctioned so we can provide financial incentives to using public dollars to provide incentives to private entities out there to do improvements on their point. So we get grants and loans to business and landowners, and it allows the municipalities to do that. It's really a planner framework to encourage the maintenance and rehabilitation of existing commercial, institutional, industrial buildings and space. And we do updates periodically. Dale's been on the spot. He's doing it every 5 years, and that's about right. Programs change. You can actually re-incentivize. You can put new things. It's kind of like an amusement park where you put in a new ride every other year, and you get a whole new market there. So it's really important to update these and not let them go stagnant, and keep it going and build on the successes. It's legislated under the Planning Act, and upper tier municipalities may participate financially in CIPs as well, such as the county. Some of the goals that you try to achieve within a community improvement plan is to really, as I mentioned, to provide incentives for businesses to enhance their buildings presentation and function to the public, to stimulate pride in our urban downtown settlement areas, Wellington North hamlets, and agri-based enterprises found in our rural areas, contribute to the overall enhancement of Wellington North communities as a place for family-friendly business and activities, and to encourage the revitalization of vacant, underutilized, or inaccessible properties and buildings, and to encourage incorporating sustainable improvements that reduce the impact of our built environment to the natural environment, and to provide a commitment to the applicants with a program timeframed up to, in this case, 2028. So another 5 years, and you should be looking at this again, and whether an update's required or you carry on doing the great things you're doing, that will be determined at that time. So the update for us is very straightforward. We know the plan inside out. The document itself is about 50 pages, 6-section report. It's specific to Wellington North. Has some county content in there on their Invest Well, county participation and financial incentives, and the Community Futures Invest Well loan as well. So it's a really good information package. Not that everyone wants to read it, and certainly members of the community don't. That's why we have an economic development officer who does interpretation and gets folks to get on board and pounds the pavement and doing all those types of things and get them to participate. Folks are there to run businesses, and sometimes they need some help with the interpretations and the opportunities there. So in this CIP, we capture the previous CIP successes. We talk about the legislative requirements of a CIP. We talk about the delineation of a SIPA, or community improvement project area, and 5 financial incentive programs. We've updated 4 of them, and we've added 1 new one under the requirement of Dale, and what we were seeing in some of the other information that was given to us. And then it provides eligibility guidelines and application requirements and examples. So opportunities that come to us include a few things. So, the documents that kind of build this for us include the Wellington North Corporate Strategic Plan. And I know, that's being updated this year, but it's really important. And I know that has periodic update as well. But the strategic plan and the community improvement plan can align business retention expansion studies that are going on in the community. The growth plan, the 2018 growth plan for Wellington North, general research on rural CIP programs really tells us what's out there and what is of interest to business owners and what is not, and how to package that well. And obviously then looking at the county programs, Invest Well County participation in the financial incentives and how they're moving ahead with theirs, and also the Community Futures program as well. So the next slide is really just an overview of the township, and it's really the SIPA, it's the full township. So this CIP update continues with Wellington North's current community improvement project area. So it includes all the settlement areas of Mount Forest and Arthur, some of the hamlets, as well as the full extent of the township for certain programs. But generally, this has been the trend. Most municipalities started with community improvement programs for downtown core areas in their municipalities. That quickly ballooned to hamlets, and then went full municipality or township wide or town wide, depending where you are. That's really changed. And just with agritourism, agribusiness, and those sort of things, why can't they be participants as well? So our second update was to broaden, and that's what we did. So here you see that the CIP is the full township. So moving on to the proposed financial incentive programs. In this current update, you'll see there's 4 of them. There's 4 blue ones, 1 green one. The green one is the brand new one, but the first 4, facade improvement loan and grant program, highly successful. Tax increment equivalent rehabilitation and redevelopment grant program, or a tier grant, equally successful in many municipalities. Building conversion and improvement grant, especially at a time where we're all looking at AODA compliance and trying to do those types of things, providing some incentive dollars to get folks to address their buildings and facilities really makes a lot of sense. The building art grant, so certainly in Arthur, I mean, you have an Arthur mural walk now, and those sort of things. These are the types of things that can actually enliven, capture, and interpret some of the legacies and backgrounds for communities. The one we added right now, and I'll talk about this one on the next couple of slides, the green energy grant. But I also note that not all programs are available in any given year of implementation. And I want everyone to understand that, because they all think they're getting maybe painted in a corner on the dollars they may have to give or provide for the incentives. Programs, which programs to use and which ones not will be available is really based on the goals and the priorities and the funding availability within any town, township, or municipality. So that's really for your EDO to come back to you and suggest these are the ones we want to go with, and then you could budget accordingly. So programs 1 to 4 have some really just quick things in here, and really it's just the programs are all the same. They've been all the same, and in fact, I think at least 3 of these have been the same since the 2011 program out there. But changing some of the maximum funding and percentages, the ones that are in red, are really what we're changing. If you go right down to 3, the building conversion improvement grant, that was boosted up to $5,000, 50% of total project cost, up to $5,000 availability. And then the types of things, the examples for eligible costs were also expanded. Any required planning application fees, you need a minor variance of building permit fees for development charges, that can be covered with some incentive dollars, certainly through the building conversion improvement grant, removal of barriers to increase accessibility or people with needs and disabilities. That certainly can be incentivized as well through this program. So basically the four have stayed intact. We just modified it based on experience and based on some of the information we received from your EDO. The new program, the Green Energy Grant, was something that came to us through your EDO, and you really want to encourage property owners to improve energy efficiency of existing commercial, industrial, and institutional buildings, and also to facilitate the installation of small-scale renewable energy systems where applicable, and to promote active and sustainable transportation infrastructure. Bike racks, bike repair stations, EV charging stations, all standard fare in communities these days, anywhere and everywhere of all scales, all sizes, and all geographic regions. So it's really a good program to have and to get up to speed with. And in this one, the value of the grant will be up to 50% of the eligible costs, or 5,000, whichever is less. And as I probably mentioned, or you could see that the eligible costs, and the example of those could be, if you need an energy audit of the building in question, or to determine if you're actually even eligible for some retrofitting, you can actually tap into this incentive program and get some dollars to help you there. If you need professional fees because you run a business and you don't necessarily know how to really do this, you can pay for someone to help you come up with project feasibility and a plan for this. So you get some sort of feasibility viability study on your building and facility and whether this can happen. The dollars in this grant could help out with that as well. And basic things with interior and exterior renovations, anything to increase energy efficiency. We see this a lot with the basic one is really just insulation. And if you want to do some green roof type projects, there's many municipalities out there that have a green roof requirement to their bylaws. If you don't have one, it's great to have a green energy grant that will allow folks to do that to an existing building, installation of appropriate on-site small scale renewable energy projects as well, whether you're doing solar panels or small wind turbine building sized. So the implementation is pretty straightforward. It's basically following the Planning Act, Section 365.1, Municipal Act, and Section 9.21 of Wellington County Official Plan. So all the legal points are all covered. The overall implementation of the grant and loan programs for the document includes a liaison with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And your EDO will do that with us for the Township of Wellington North. And the implementation or the administration of this will probably continue the way it's been going. And my understanding, it gets administered through council, but through the economic development officer. So he would have a committee. We call it a CPAC. So it's a community improvement project advisory committee, a CPAC. Most projects on an annual basis for incentives are on a first come, first served basis until the dollars are saturated or exhausted, I should say. The limited available funding aligns with identified funding for each program, and that's done annually. And the CIP should be reviewed by the EDO annually, and likely does a report to council anyways on the successes and shortcomings. There'll be more information. I kept this pretty brief, but you could contact Dale, your EDO, and anything he can't answer, I can likely answer, and I can take some questions now. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Any questions from council for Sean? We are going to be dealing with the update in a more formal way later in our agenda. So
I understand.
any questions? No questions.
Oh, you got one.
Penny, go ahead.
I don't know whether this has occurred before or not, but when a grant is given for this facade improvement of the building, and we always hope that the business is going to be successful, what would happen if the building, if the business should not be successful, another business comes into that building, wants to change the facade completely, and I understand it's depending on how much money is available. I'm just wondering, is there, or has it ever happened that only a certain number of businesses would be able to change the facade on that one building?
Dale, do you have experience in the township? I can speak about other experiences.
Thanks, Sean, and thanks for the question, Councillor Rankin. We do not have any restrictions around that. So a property owner can submit multiple applications over future years if they want. And there's no restriction on the grant application that says they have to stay in business for a year in order to get the entire grant. So it has happened where we've had businesses that put up a new sign, ran the business for a year or two, weren't successful. But that happens and there's no recourse in that. If they receive a loan from the township as part of a community improvement loan update or loan, they pay that over 5 years, and that does get added to the tax bill if they sell the property in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I could just add through you, the mayor, that's very consistent with almost every municipality we've worked in. It's a great question. It's been brought up almost in every municipality we've worked in as well, but we don't prejudice the next owner or operator of a business. So the whole idea is that you still make a choice at application time on whether to approve and pursue or not. And but generally, I haven't heard of one case where they said no, thank you to a new owner.
Councillor McCabe.
And excuse me, through you, Andy, and kind of in the same vein as Councillor Rankin, if we were to give a grant out and the business is like a facade grant, and then nothing happens to it and the business goes up for rent for someone else to maybe try and start a business, does that ever come back to us, or do they give the money back if they don't use it in the intention that we kind of granted it to them, if that makes sense?
Yep, no, so another great question. We don't advance the funds until the business or the property owner pay the bill.
Okay.
So if they put up a new sign, they pay the bill, they send us the invoice, we remit 50% or whatever the grant was. So
Okay.
It's covered off that way.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Sorry, any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Karen, for advancing.
Okay, as I mentioned, we'll come back to that later in our agenda. But next on our agenda is a recess to move into a public meeting. So the recommendation I have here is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North recess the June 19th, 2023 regular meeting of council for the purpose of holding a public meeting under the Planning Act for John and Mary Weber minor variance and cannabis zoning bylaw. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll switch to the Committee of Adjustment agenda here, and I'll call the Committee of Adjustment to order and ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest in regard to this application A06/23 for John and Mary Weber. Councillor McCabe.
I have none.
I have none as well. Councillor Hearn.
No,
Councillor Rankin.
I have none.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move for next to the minutes of the previous Committee of Adjustment meeting, and the recommendation is that the Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes of June 5th, 2023 for application A04/23, excuse me, and A05/23 be adopted as presented. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Hearn. Any question on those minutes? All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Move on to our application for this evening. This is application A06/23 for John and Mary Weber. Location of the subject property is described as concession 10 North Part Lot 15 and is municipally known as 9089 concession 11. Property is approximately 61.16 hectares in size and is shown on the map in your package. Purpose and effect of the application is to provide relief from the maximum permitted size and to recognize the existing home business, fabric store, baked goods, and dry goods. The applicant is proposing a 195.09 meters squared addition to an existing 260.12 meters squared business, resulting in a total size of 455.21 meters squared. Other variances may be considered where deemed appropriate. How is notice given for this public meeting?
To property owners within 60 meters, as well as to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on June 5th, 2023.
Thank you. Curtis?
Good evening, Chair and committee members. So let's just have a brief presentation on the application. So the subject lands are designated prime agricultural and core green lands in the official plan. So this property has an existing site-specific exemption in the zoning bylaw that permits a home business on the farm property. And the applicant's request is to expand the floor area of this business to allow a maximum of 4,900 square feet. And I understand the applicant's proposing to add an addition to the rear of the building. Planning staff are satisfied that the home business remains small scale and is consistent with the provincial on-farm diversified use guidelines. And in conclusion, planning staff have no concerns and are of the opinion that the 4 tests of a minor variance are met. And I would note that the applicant, John Weber, is here tonight as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
No, there has not been.
Any persons wishing to be notified of the decision must submit a written request to the Secretary Treasurer. And with that, I will open the floor to any questions or comments from the public and or the applicant. Mr. Weaver, did you want to comment on this at all?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone registered to speak?
No, we don't.
Okay, so I guess we'll move right to committee. Any questions or comments from committee members?
No, I have none.
Okay, we're moving right along here. Okay, we'll move to the decision then. And the decision will read as follows: that the minor variance applied for in application A06/23 for the property described as concession 10 North Part Lot 15, geographic Township of Arthur, with a civic address of 9089 concession 11 to provide the following relief. Number 1, that an increased maximum floor area of 455.21 square meters be permitted for an existing home business, whereas the bylaw allows for a maximum floor area of 260.12 square meters. All those in favor? That's approved. Thank you. So then the only thing we have left on this agenda is adjournment. I have a recommendation that the Committee of Adjustment meeting of June 19th, 2023 be adjourned at 7:48 p.m. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Rankin. All of those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're adjourned from our Committee of Adjustment meeting. And we'll move to our public meeting and I'll call the public meeting to order and ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. This is in regarding to zoning bylaw amendment 07/23 for the Township of Wellington North. I have none to declare. Councillor Rankin.
None.
Councillor McCabe.
I have none.
Councillor Hearn.
No.
Okay, thank you. The owner applicant in this case is Township of Wellington North. And the location of the subject land, the proposed amendment affects all lands in the Township of Wellington North. A map showing the affected lands has not been provided since the bylaw affects all lands in the township. Purpose and effect of the proposed amendment is to update and introduce new zoning regulations for cannabis-related uses in the township. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment includes regulations for the growing of cannabis, the processing of cannabis, and other related uses. The proposed bylaw does not propose to regulate the growing of cannabis plants for recreational purposes at a residence in accordance with the personal use allotments permitted under the Cannabis Act by the province of Ontario. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notice was posted in the May 25th, 2023 edition of the Wellington Advertiser and is well mailed and emailed to agencies on May 25th, 2023.
Thank you. Curtis, I'll turn this one over to you.
Thanks, Mayor Lennox and members of council. Yeah, I'm happy to be here tonight for this public meeting and to present to you the final report for our cannabis related use study here in the township. So it's been over, as I said, it's been over 2 years since this process was started. And happy to provide the following recommendations for council's consideration. So council may recall that an interim control bylaw was first passed by council in September of 2021. And this bylaw prohibited any new cannabis related uses in the township. And the passing of the ICBL allowed for a planning study to be undertaken to review cannabis growing and production as a land use. So this bylaw was extended by council last September and is now set to expire this upcoming September. So as part of the land use study, we prepared a background report in April of 2022, followed by a regulatory options report in June of 2022. And then this brings us to the public meeting here tonight and the final report. So planning staff have prepared a draft zoning bylaw, which is included in the agenda package tonight. And this bylaw introduces new regulations for cannabis related uses in the township. So this bylaw has been written based on the background study, the regulatory options report, and a review of other municipal zoning bylaws and best practices in the province. So what I'll do is I'll briefly take council through the proposed bylaw. So the first part of the new bylaw includes a series of new definitions and also has amended some of the existing definitions. So you'll see in the bylaw, there's a definition of cannabis, of sensitive uses, of cannabis related indoor and outdoor uses, etc. And we've also proposed changes to some of the definitions, mainly the definition of agricultural use. Another change is the introduction of a parking standard for indoor cannabis and hemp related uses. This would be the idea for any visitors or employees. As presently, the bylaw doesn't have a standard for that use. The bylaw also includes provisions that site plan approval is required for indoor cannabis and hemp growing and production uses. And the next steps as well would be to update the township site plan control bylaw to include these uses as well in the bylaw to clarify that site plan control would be applicable. So the bylaw allows for the outdoor growing of cannabis and hemp in the agricultural area of the township on properties that are over 25 acres. And subject to other criteria such as setbacks. And the setbacks proposed in the bylaw right now would be this is again for outdoor growing. So this is in a field. The proposed setback would be 500 meters to a settlement area and 300 meters to a sensitive land use that is defined in the bylaw. So sensitive land use would be a residential zone or designation, a church, a school, other uses where I believe there's quite a list of uses, but it's defined just to include places where people gather or sleep. So this permission, the as of right permission for growing cannabis in a field and hemp recognizes the agricultural nature of growing the plants. It also recognizes the seasonal nature of outdoor growing, where there would be one crop that would be harvested in the early fall. So the potential for odor and other nuisance, other nuisance impacts would be limited due to the seasonality of growing cannabis outdoors. Should note that any outdoor growing is subject to licensing and the approval of Health Canada. Now moving on to indoor cannabis and hemp growing and production. The bylaw introduces 3 new zones. And those are the agricultural cannabis zone, an industrial cannabis zone, and a rural industrial cannabis zone. So the bylaw has been set up that the indoor growing and production of cannabis and including hemp would require a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the use on a property. These new zones that I've described include provisions for minimum lot sizes, also setbacks to sensitive uses, and requirements for lighting controls and odor controls. In the agricultural area, an indoor use is proposed that it would need to be set back a minimum of 500 meters to a sensitive land use and 1,000 meters to a settlement area boundary. In industrial areas, indoor uses are to be set back 300 meters to sensitive land uses. And I note the bylaw includes provisions that all indoor uses are to provide odor controls and lighting controls to ensure that all light is shielded from view for the growing of the plants. So this necessity of a zoning bylaw amendment provides for the review of compatibility on a site-by-site basis. The concentrated year-round growing can produce odors and nuisances. And in light of that, and as well as in the absence of further controls or guidance on odor by the province or the federal government. So for example, there isn't presently an MDS tool or type-like tool that deals with odor similar to a livestock operation. And in light of the absence of that further regulation or tool, that's why we're recommending the approach for a zoning bylaw amendment for these indoor uses. Now, a few final things to note about the bylaw and our review. As mentioned in the opening description, the bylaw does not further regulate the personal growing of 4 plants. This permission remains with the province and the federal government. The intent's not to make any changes or additional regulations for that. We also in the bylaw are not proposing any changes for the 2 properties in Riverstown, which had previously obtained site-specific zoning bylaw amendments, so they'll propose to remain unchanged. And finally, note that we have reviewed the proposed bylaw with the township solicitor, and as a result of our discussions last week, we've made a few adjustments to the bylaw. And related to the definition of agriculture, we've added some additional wording to provide, as lawyers would suggest, additional clarity. And the final bylaw that's here for council's approval or consideration for approval includes that change. So note the consideration of this bylaw tonight concludes the township's current review of cannabis related uses. So we recommend going forward that the township continue to monitor cannabis related legislation and best practices for the growing and production of cannabis as a land use. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you.
Curtis, the bylaw that was in the agenda is not going to be the one they approve. The amendment was.
Would you like me to read out what the specific amendments? Sure.
Just to be clear that I understand what's happening, from what was published in the agenda originally, the bylaw has been altered based on some feedback, I'm assuming.
Slightly, right?
Yes. So, and go to the bylaw. So there's 2 changes. First was a typo to structure. So that was corrected. And then the main change of importance was right in section 1, where it refers to that section 5 definitions agricultural is amended by adding the words, and this is where the new words are inserted. the growing of cannabis, the processing of cannabis and cannabis derivatives, including but not limited to cannabis seeds and cannabis oils. And then the rest continues. So basically, it's the addition of the growing of cannabis, the processing of cannabis and cannabis derivatives, including but not limited to cannabis seeds and cannabis oils. So these additional uses are uses that are not considered agricultural uses in terms of the definition of the bylaw.
Thank you. Okay, we have some correspondence from the Saugeen Valley Conservation and Grand River Conservation Authority. Do we have any further correspondence?
No, we do not.
Okay, bylaw will be considered at a regular council meeting following the public meeting today. Persons wishing notice of the passing of the bylaw must submit a written request. And with that, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments. Do we have anyone registered to speak on this, Karen?
We do not.
Okay, I'll turn it to members of council then. Any questions or comments from council? Oh, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. I'm just a little concerned about the wording where it says the distance between the growing operation in a rural area and to the sensitive area. If it's going to the lot line of the sensitive area, that's fine. But it says that if there's a residence on that sensitive area, then the distance is going to go to the residence itself, which would shorten the distance actually between the growing operation and the house. And I'm just concerned that the area on the sensitive land between the house and the lot line may be occupied by family or children playing there. And so I think that might be a little close. I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of having the wording changed so that it reads the distance to the lot line of the sensitive area.
Through the mayor to Councillor Rankin. So in selecting the wording, which I'll step back. So what's proposed in the rural area would be a 300-meter setback from outdoor growing and 500 meters for indoor growing, if permitted, from a sensitive land use. So in cases where it's a cemetery, land zoned residential or designated residential, a place of worship, a school, so those types of examples, it is to the lot line. However, in a case of a farm or a rural residential property, the bylaw is proposing that the setbacks then be to the dwelling itself. So in thinking about that, about your question, Councillor Rankin, the difficulty with using to the lot line would be in, if you looked at most farm sizes here in the old, I'm looking at on the wall at the old original, or not original, but one of the county atlases from the 1800s. A lot of our properties in Arthur and Luther Township were surveyed at about 300 meters wide. So effectively, if we had a 300-meter setback to the lot line, most farms, it would leave very little area on most farms for the severance. So I'm thinking about that. If it is to the dwelling, it would provide, there'd be additional opportunity to locate a facility or a field, being that it would be to the farm, the neighbors' dwellings. So at the rear of a farm, you could meet the 300-meter setback. So I think it's a fair comment, and I think about the setbacks to someone's yard or area around their home. I think that the difficulty would be due to the rectangular shape of our lots. It makes it difficult to locate on the farms.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I understand the difficulty in the size of the farming. However, it's a concern for the people in the residence that I'm worried about. When I was working, I had to be in contact with raw marijuana plants that were seized, And I ended up with sore throats and headaches. So I think that's a real concern for the people living in these residences. And the people that want to grow the marijuana, if they're aware of the bylaw and aware of the size of their land, then they should use it appropriately. So.
Other questions, comments? I have a few little ones, Curtis, just want to make sure I'm absolutely clear on this. So in terms of outdoor growing in an agricultural zone, if you can meet the setback distances, they don't need to come for a zoning bylaw amendment. They can just go ahead and do that as long as they're meeting the other regulations. Is that correct?
Yes, so there was a frontage, we have a minimum frontage proposed, a lot area, setbacks to the lot lines. If they had a storage shed, there's a limit on that, if they're keeping fertilizer, that sort of thing. And then the setbacks to the sensitive land uses and the settlement areas. So if they met those, they could be permitted without further review.
Okay, and then anything that's, just to, again, to make sure I'm clear, anything that's indoor is going to have to come to us for like, we haven't designated a zone where this is acceptable. We're saying you got to come to us so that we can review it and do a zoning bylaw amendment.
Yes, that's right. We created, the bylaw creates the 3 zones that then would be applied, one to the rural area, one to industrial areas like in town, and then the rural industrial for Riverstown, for example. But yeah, any new indoor use for hemp or cannabis production or growing would require the zoning amendment.
Okay. So, and the other question I had deals with our interim control bylaw. You mentioned earlier that it expires in September. Will the passing of this new bylaw automatically end that, or does it still continue until September?
No, it's a good question, and we did briefly discuss that with staff today. So the intent or the idea would be, if this is approved and comes into force and effect, then we would come back and have that bylaw repealed. Ultimately, if we didn't do anything, it would expire, but we could certainly repeal it once we know this current bylaws in force and effect.
For clarity, it has to be sent out, and then there's a 20-day appeal period that someone could appeal it.
Okay.
So we were waiting until after that.
Okay, thank you. And just one out of curiosity, more than anything else, the operations currently in Riverston, would they comply with this, or would they be legal non-conforming?
So as it's proposed now, they would be compliant and would continue under their current site-specific zoning amendments. So we're not proposing any further changes to them. So they have site-specific exceptions, and they would be left unchanged.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor McCabe.
This one, thank you, Andy. And you just kind of jarred my memory a little bit. So the ones that are in Riverston, say they go to sell, see me that property, are they grandfathered in for the next buyers?
Through the mayor to Councilor McCabe's, so they would they'd maintain their zoning unless the zoning was changed on the property.
Okay.
So even if they closed or didn't operate, if the zoning's in place, they have that zoning right unless the zoning was changed.
So it sticks with the property kind of thing.
Right,
Yeah.
until changed. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, so we will be dealing with the bylaw later in our regular council meeting. Okay, so I guess all we have left here for this is the adjournment of the public meeting. And a recommendation here that the public meeting of June 19th, 2023 be adjourned at 8:08 p.m. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Hearn. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We're adjourned from the public meeting. And we'll go back to our regular council meeting. Have a recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North resume the June 19th, 2023 regular meeting of council at 8:09 p.m. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Rankin. Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we right away. It was published. Okay, we have a recommendation to deal with the bylaw for the cannabis public meeting we were just dealing with. And the recommendation is that bylaw number 47-23 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 66-01 being a zoning bylaw for the Township of Wellington North as amended, be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Hearn. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Rankin, go ahead.
Am I able to defer, not defer, but am I able to say I'm not accepting that except for that one? I will accept it except for that one provision of the wording.
Okay, so there's a couple of options that we could do here. We could put it forward to ask it to be sent back to staff. So we could defer the approval, ask staff to review it if council wishes, or I mean, the other alternative obviously is to not vote in favor of it.
Okay.
You know, yeah, so you could ask for a recorded vote as well.
I would like to have a recorded vote, please.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Okay, I'll call the motion. Well, I guess Karen's going to do it with a recorded vote.
So, sorry, Councillor McCabe, yay or nay?
Yay.
Councillor Hearn, yay or nay?
Yay.
Councillor Burke is absent. Councillor Rankin, yay or nay?
Nay.
Mayor Lennox, yay or nay?
Yay.
So, that is carried with 3 votes out of 4.
Okay, thank you. Next is the adoption of the minutes of council and public meeting. We have a recommendation that the minutes of the regular meeting of council and the public meeting held on June 5th, 2023 be adopted as circulated. Did I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Hearn, seconded by Councillor McCabe. Any questions on any of those minutes? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Don't believe we have any business arising from previous meetings, so we're on to items for consideration. Pull out any of those that we would like to have further discussion on. Councillor McCabe.
Through you, Mayor, 3A. This is the agreement, the bylaw enforcement services agreement with the city of Guelph.
Okay.
And 7B. This is a letter from the Mount Forest Legion.
7B. Okay. Anybody have any others? Councillor Hearn, did you have, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, 4A.
It's a community improvement program.
Yes.
Anything else? You look like you're deep in thought, Councillor Hearn. Did you have any others?
I'm having computer problems, so thank you for bearing with me. Why don't we look at 6A too?
6A, this is the traffic counts. Okay. Last call. Anybody have any others? Okay, so we'll deal with everything else. And the recommendation for that is that all items listed under items for consideration on the June 9th, 2023 council agenda, with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Hearn. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll go back to 3A, I believe is the first one. Thanks, Curtis. So we have a recommendation. This is with regard to City of Guelph bylaw enforcement services. So a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report CBO 2023-07, being a report on the City of Guelph bylaw enforcement services 6-month extension. And further, that the Council of the Township of Wellington North authorizes the mayor and clerk to enter into amending agreement to extend bylaw 122-21 with the City of Guelph for the purposes of providing bylaw enforcement services to the Township of Wellington North. Get a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Rankin. And we'll open the floor for discussion. Councillor McCabe, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox, and through you, I guess I have a couple questions. I guess probably more for Darren than anyone else. Wait till you get there, I guess. What, how much has this service agreement cost us so far, like from day one?
All right, so in 2022, which was a 12-month program, the township budgeted $28,600 for City of Guelph services. The actual cost for 2022 was $17,378. This year, we budgeted less. We budgeted $25,000, and to date, we've only been invoiced for January and February, and we've spent $995 to date.
Okay, that's great. Seems to be working in our favor that way. Can I
Go ahead.
So yeah, you kind of answered my next question. I was going to say, how much does it cost for the next little while, but that's not too bad of a price at all. Has there been many, I guess, enforcements of the bylaws in that year? Like it doesn't, like the amount that we had budgeted for and the amount that we paid out is a lot different. So I guess there hasn't been that many violations.
I would say it's maybe a more efficient process than what we anticipated.
Okay.
So in 2022, some quick stats. We had 194 complaints. Only 4 of those went unresolved, and 9 of those we went in and did the cleanup for them.
Oh, wow. And then they get billed for our cleanup.
They get invoiced, and if the invoice goes unpaid, we add it to their property taxes.
Okay. Just got one more.
Go ahead.
How has, because this was kind of a pilot project between City of Guelph and our municipality, how's in your idea what, I guess, how has the public interaction been like?
Well, the nature of bylaw enforcement, we have one side, the people that have a property that are not in compliance, and they don't much care for the process because they're being asked to clean up and comply with bylaws.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the other side, the people that have complained, and they think that township should clean it up yesterday. So most people are understanding, but they would like it cleanups to happen sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Hearn, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lennox. Darren, I'm just wondering, well, first of all, whether they're how good they are to get along with, and second of all, I've been looking a little bit at the website, and I'm wondering whether there's ability to add a few more categories. It's fairly restrictive when you go under bylaws, or is that just muddying the waters and making it more confusing?
Through you, Mayor Lennox, we do have that ability. Whenever we started the pilot program, senior staff sat down and we decided which bylaws we'd like to contract out. We went through multiple departments, and the bylaws that we've got are what staff was recommending. Now, my intent will be to bring back a longer term bylaw for 2024 and beyond. So this fall, I'll have that same conversation with other senior management and see if we're content or whether we need to expand the service to bylaws in other departments.
Other questions or comments? Darren, I've got a couple of questions if I can. From my perspective, this has worked very well in terms of there's always the feedback, as you indicated, from both sides of the thing, but in terms of the feedback I've got, it's very positive in terms of the way that the city of Guelph is able to track these events and keep track of them, receive the complaints, and manage them through. I trust it's been reasonably good from an internal perspective, and I guess I'd also, if you could comment on the city of Guelph's perspective on this, if they've shared that with you.
Yeah, from staff's perspective, the interactive map that the public and staff use is great. I can see the back end of the system, so collecting data, checking on the status of complaints and resolutions is a fairly simple thing for me to do through the computer program. The city of Guelph, they've brought up a couple of recommendations for data sharing and ownership of documents that we would plan to address if we go ahead with a longer term commitment.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor McCabe, I saw you there. I just got a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
First.
Yep.
So just this is just more of a comment. I mean, I've had conversations with other mayors from Wellington County, particularly about bylaw enforcement. This seems to be a challenging subject in most municipalities, and I've been telling them about this arrangement. And once they get over the surprise, they're like, well, how well does it work? And so I've been telling them it's working pretty well. I hope I'm not wrong. But it's, I think once our residents get used to it, and there's always new people to educate. I think it's been working well, and I hope that we can find a way to continue it.
Thank you. I agree that it's working well, and people that aren't comfortable with using computers and internet they've been pretty good to work with municipal staff, and we can input those complaints for them, or they also can call down direct through calling the township of here and be connected directly to Guelph bylaw. So there's alternatives.
And another comment, I just had a call today about another bylaw issue. It wasn't one that city of Guelph looks over after, but this individual was concerned that they had, I think, went through our phone system and got connected with the city of Guelph, and they're like, well, what's going on? So I had to have that conversation. So I think we have an ongoing communication, education thing to do with this as well. So. Councillor McCabe, I think you had.
Yeah, sorry, one last one, Darren. Is there, from the city of Guelph, is there one dedicated officer that services Wellington North, or is it kind of on a rotation, or whoever's on staff at the time or on the clock, so to speak, or?
So they have their entire department is available to come to Wellington North and are appointed. For the smaller complaints, it could be just about anybody from their team, but for the more serious complaints, not more serious, the larger, more complex, it's one or two dedicated staff people. But we get the on-call people for the ones that are timely, where they're a rental unit with no heat, a broken window, things like that, no water in their rental unit.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thanks, Darren. So. Okay, so we need to call a vote on this one. Then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 4A. This is in regard to the community improvement program. The recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report EDO 2023-13 on the community improvement program, and further that council receives the updated community improvement program as presented by Sean Kelly from pl.ural, and further that after the 30-day public review period is over, the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North authorize the mayor and clerk sign a bylaw to adopt the new community improvement program, and further the council approves the following grants. $2,500 public art grant to the Arthur Chamber of Commerce, $2,500 facade improvement grant to the Sacred Heart Church in Kenilworth, $1,500 accessibility grant to Sacred Heart Church in Kenilworth, and $2,500 facade improvement grant to the Mount Forest Museum and Archives. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Ken.
Just 1 second, sorry. Andy, just before we do this, I probably have a pecuniary interest with this one, just because I go to the church in Kenilworth that's up for the grants.
Okay,
So I'll recuse myself from this. So up to you three.
okay. You need something further, Karen? Okay. So I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Rankin and Councillor Hearn, thank you. Any discussion on this one? Councillor Hearn, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess two things. The first thing, I mean, going back to the grants, I just wanted to point out the Arthur Chamber, that's for the entry sign. I think I spoke to council a little bit about that last week, and that's a refurb of the sign, and my penny pinching chamber is going to come considerably below that budget. So I just wanted to put that out there, that they're saving a little bit of money. It'll be down for a couple days, and they're adamant the sign will be back up for July the 1st. But my second question was about figure 1.1, which is on page 3, to Dale. Just some comment on how the program is working with the number of applicants, et cetera. Like, there was a huge spike in 2019 and 2020. The program was a little slow to start, which I totally understand, back in 2012, but then it's dropped off a bit. And just wondering whether that's due to COVID or maybe just needing to refresh the program, or both.
Take it away, Dale.
Thank you, Councillor Hearn. Yeah, I think when we started the program 12 years ago, we realized it was going to take some time for the CIP to get traction and for everyone to understand what it's all about. And that's pretty evident when you look at that chart on page 3. As to why 2019 and 2020 were amazing years, that's a really good question. You know, I think we just did our 3rd revision of the community improvement program in 2017. I think there was a lot of communication going on. We had a downtown revitalization teams in both communities. If you recall, we got some funding from the province for Main Street revitalization, and that really did contribute to a large number of applications coming in 2019, 2020. And again, the economy was good and things were booming and our main streets were hopping, and then the world kind of ended for a little while, and that certainly slowed it down. But we're still in double digits when it comes to applications. I think this year we're probably going to hit 15, maybe 20 applications. So I think it is, you know, a bit of a roller coaster. But I can do some analysis on the numbers of 2019, 2020, Councillor Hearn, get back to you if I can see anything there as to why they were so high at that time.
Thanks, Dale. Any other questions? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? All right. Sorry, that's carried. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to 6A. This is the report on traffic counts. Recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report Ops 2023-23 being report on traffic counts, and further the council directs staff to include an annual $10,000 traffic count allowance starting in the 2024 budget year. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Hearn. And with that, sorry, Councillor Rankin on the seconder. Sorry. Discussion on this one. I was thinking ahead, Councillor Hearn. I think it was you that wanted to pull this one out for discussion.
Yeah, it was, and I don't have a whole lot of comment about it, except that very, very valuable exercise, and I'm glad that we're going back to do some additional work on this. I was kind of interested in the numbers though. When I went through it, I highlighted a few with roads with speed demons on them. It really noticed as I'm going down at some of these, the paved concession roads are, 15 or the average speed's 15 or 20 kilometers an hour over the limit. And a gravel road, it's 15 or 20 below. So, I mean, that was kind of my only comment, but I was really, really interested in the results. Especially was it the 6th concession? Or line 6, sorry.
Any other questions, comments? I would just add that I found this really interesting, the data too. I mean, even the difference between Main Street South and Main Street North and Mount Forest, I found astounding. The degree of difference in that. And another one that really stood out for me, and I've had some feedback about it recently, is Wellington Street in Mount Forest as well. It'd be interesting to get the numbers on Albert Street and compare the two, because they do tend to both serve a similar purpose in that they're bringing people from the east side of Mount Forest towards Main Street. So I look forward to future traffic counts. I think it certainly, this can help inform us as to, if there's streets that need additional traffic measures taken. This can help identify that, and especially with the speed information, that's really valuable. So we can identify where the real challenges are and how we can work to address them in the future. So thanks to staff for doing all that. It's a lengthy list, and you go through it and then you go back. I went back and referenced some of the others and compared, and there was a few surprises for me too. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to, I believe it's 7B now. So in regard to the correspondence from the Legion, recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive correspondence from Ken Thompson, President, Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 134, Mount Forest, dated June 14th, 2023, requesting approval for placing a tent in their parking lot to host a licensed music/beer tent in conjunction with the Mount Forest Fireworks Festival. And further, the staff worked with the RCL Branch 134 and submitting the request for a noise exemption for Friday, July 14th, 3 p.m. to 1 a.m., Saturday, July 15th from 11 a.m. to 1 a.m., and Sunday, July 16th from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. I get a mover and a seconder for that. So moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor Hearn. And we'll open that up for discussion. Questions, comments? Councillor McCabe.
Just a comment. Excuse me. I'm happy to obviously support this. I think in talking with kind of a couple of different times about this event that they have during the fireworks festival, I believe this is probably one of their biggest fundraisers as well. So I just wanted to bring that to light with it's good to have the Legion in town, and it's nice that they help out with this, and then the community helps out with them to keep the doors open.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, yeah, I'm happy to support this as well. I think it's great. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of the items for consideration. Any notice of motion this evening? Not seeing any, so we'll move on to community group meeting program report. Anybody have anything they'd like to report on this evening? Penny, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox. I'd just like to report on the cultural roundtable. Our last meeting last week, it was a very interesting and full meeting. It began with a light lunch, and they had presentations by Matthew Ray. He presented the certificate of the year to Bonnie McDougall for being senior of the year. It wasn't ready at the time when she received the nomination or the accolades. And Mayor Lennox presented $10,000 check to Kate Rowley for the Lions Blacksmith Shop. And Chair of the Cultural Roundtable, Bonnie McDougall, presented $1,000 to Sharon Wenger and Stacy Stevenson for the Mount Forest Fireworks Festival. And the Executive Director, Raymond Susi from Central Wellington Community Foundation, presented $1,500 to Aletha MacArthur from the New Growth Family Center in Mount Forest. And also the getting into the main part of the meeting, the North Wellington Culture page for Minto Mapleton and Wellington North. They've partnered together to have a page in the Wellington Advertiser, and it is on the last issue of each month. And our next meeting will be a joint meeting, the Cultural Roundtable of Wellington North, Minto and Mapleton. We'll have a joint meeting on September the 6th. Minto will be the host, and it will be held at the Harrison Library. And Wellington North Cultural Roundtable promotional brochure is being worked on and drafted, and will showcase our major events and cultural assets. And last but not least, we have Wellington North Culture Days, which are from September 22nd to October 15th. And some of the highlights will be the newcomer welcome and volunteer celebration on September the 14th at the Sports Complex in Mount Forest. And there'll be Culture Days at Mount Forest Farmers Market on September 23rd. At Met's Pumpkin Festival on September the 30th. Also, the Lions Blacksmith Shop will be open on September 30th. And a variety of events on October 14th to sort of end up the cultural days will be at the Sports Complex in Mount Forest. And some of the ideas are to be finalized yet, but hopefully we'll have some spinners and dancers and some artisans there.
Thanks, Penny. Any other reports on this? Lisa? Go ahead.
Sure. I had both chamber meetings last week. Mount Forest Chamber now meets at 4:30, which is great for me. But I'll start off with the Arthur Chamber. A lot of their discussion was around the July 1st Canada Day Street Market, and that's all on schedule. So I just wanted to remind everyone about that. That's Saturday, July the 1st. The market runs from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. There's going to be a ton of free interactive activities for the kids in addition to the market. So a good family day downtown in addition to some shopping. The Mount Forest Chamber, everything's on track for the fireworks festival. Doing some upgrades, again, looking into upgrading their website, which seems to be a constantly moving target for anyone that has websites. And a lot of talk about their ladies night and new committees and all sorts of good stuff.
Okay. Thank you for that update. I don't think I have anything in particular to report on this evening. So we'll move on to bylaws. We have a recommendation here that bylaw number 49-23 and 50-23 be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Rankin. Any question or comments on those bylaws? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Move on to cultural moment. So the cultural moment for June 19th celebrates William G. Gorvitt. Mr. William Gorvitt was born in Devonshire, England, and came to Canada in 1854, settling in Markham, Ontario. One of his sons, William G. Gorvitt, was born there on December 11th, 1861. He farmed in Arthur Township for 3 years around 1880 and then moved to Arthur Village, becoming a carpenter and was in the building business. He married Elizabeth A. Leith on April 19th, 1883. In 1890, he purchased the first planing mill erected in Arthur Village on Frederick Street West. He sold the business 4 years later, but then repurchased it and ran it successfully. Mr. Gorvitt was elected to the council in 1897 and then served for another 3 terms. In 1905, he was elected as Reeve of the village. On July 14th, 1921, the Enterprise News reported that shortly before 5 p.m., the mill was struck by lightning. The lightning seemed to have struck the hydroelectric wires and followed them into the mill building, which was soon enveloped in flames. The damage was estimated at $12,000 to $15,000, but Mr. Gorvitt had no insurance. In 1905, this mill's predecessor and a large quantity of lumber were destroyed by fire as well, but he replaced them at that time. This time, he was of the opinion that he would not rebuild the mill. As the mill was one of the town's best industries and drew a large business from neighboring towns, it was a decided loss to Arthur. William had multi-interests such as building outside of his planing mill, was more or less interested in real estate, and owned a lumber yard in connection with the mill. He was a self-made man and owed his successes to his own efforts. The community considered him a first-class businessman, and he was prominent both socially and commercially. His brother John also settled in the Arthur area and became a successful farmer with mixed farming on Lot 24, Concession 1. This was submitted by Councillor Penny Rankin on behalf of the Wellington North Cultural Roundtable. Thanks, Penny. That's your cultural moment for today. We'll move on to our confirming bylaw. We have a recommendation that bylaw number 51-23 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North at its regular meeting held on June 19th, 2023. We read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Rankin, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Before we move to adjournment, I just draw your attention to the meetings, notices, and announcements. The Wellington North Farmers Market's getting off to a start this weekend coming up, and will run till September 30th. Arthur BIA is having their meeting via video conferencing on the 21st. Mount Forest Chamber townwide shopping event downtown Mount Forest. It's Thursday, June 22nd from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Arthur Cash and Carry Summer Vibes Market, June 24th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Louise Marshall Hospital Foundation Annual General Meeting at the Mount Forest Library, June 28th at 7 p.m. Arthur Chamber of Commerce Canada Day Street Market, as Councillor Hearn mentioned earlier, is of course on July the 1st from 9 a.m. to 2:30. And the Optimist Club Canada Day Weekend Celebrations, July 1st and 2nd. Our next regular council meeting is July 10th. Rec Parks and Leisure Committee on July 11th, and our second council meeting in July is the 24th. That we will move on to adjournment. Recommendation here that the regular council meeting of June 19th, 2023 be adjourned at 8:42 p.m. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Hearn. All those in favor? That's carried. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening.